Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all of our witnesses today. I have 6 minutes, as the Chair said. So many questions, so little time, so I'm going to try to be brief with my questions and try to get a few in here for all of you. In earlier meetings, we heard testimony about Indigenous procurement and targets and some of the challenges. Ms. Rasmussen, I know from some of our prior meetings that I've had with your organization, Metal Lake Tribal Council, one of your businesses, Polar Oils, has been having some issues in getting through the procurement process. Would you mind just briefly sharing that story and maybe offer a bit of a solution? I know you referred to it in your comments about some of the bureaucracy and the challenges. If you would just maybe share that quick story so we could learn something from that.
Yes, thanks very much for the question. Gary is correct. MP Vidal is correct. We do have a company called Polar Oils. Polar Oils is a fuel wholesaling company. Right in our traditional territory, we have Cold Lake Air Force Base and also Primrose Air Weapons Range. And we have been unable to get through the bureaucracy with our company, Polar Oils, to be able to register, to be able to bid on the supply of fuel to any of those services that exist in by the military in our traditional territory. So it's just so cumbersome that our management group just does not have time to focus specifically on that. They cannot find their way through or find the resources to find their way through to get completely registered to be able to begin bidding. It's extremely cumbersome.
Thank you, Tina, and appreciate that. And it's something we need to learn to make the system better. I'm going to move on quickly because we have two other great witnesses today. So, Mr. Louie and Mr. Buffalo, I'm going to ask you each the same question and give you a chance to both answer it. It'll be efficient that way. You both, in some of the material and then the meetings I've had with you in the past, you talk about the contaminated sites and the reclamation of those sites and what economic impacts that could have on many First Nations across the country. So my question for each of you would simply be, can you kind of expand a little bit on the impact that these sites and the reclamation of these sites could have on Indigenous businesses, maybe in the short term through the process of reclaiming them, but secondly, in the longer term, from the benefits that would be achieved by those First Nations to have access to that land as they try to raise capital and have future economic prosperity in their nation. So, Mr. Buffalo, maybe you can go first, and then Mr. Louie, if you'd follow up answering the same question, please.
Thank you, MP Gary Vidal. I appreciate the question. Yes, you know, in my territory where I'm from, Treaty 6, Samson Cree Nation, Pigeon Lake, we had a world-class oil field, the Bonnie Glen Pool. And in that area, you know, exploration had started probably in the late 60s. And obviously, our community boundaries aren't getting any bigger. and the oil and gas has come and kind of gone, but you know the remnants is still there. So the reclamation is very important, and what it's provided for us is the ability to start taking care of the land again. And in the case in Pigeon Lake, you know, when we can reclaim some of the land, then we can proceed with the more housing project, and there could be some commercial opportunities as well. But, you know, for the most part, you know, we're eliminating the methane emissions from these old abandoned wells. And, you know, I think that's very important and goes along with the government's issue on carbon. And it's been very well. We had training program for this site rehabilitation program. We've put over 300 young people to work, and they're doing their part in cleaning the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Bedell, for your question. Environmental contamination is a big topic, a big issue for us, and I touched upon it briefly in my legacy aspect of the barriers. Firstly, with regard to our communities that have land codes, we have 103 operational land codes, 194 signatories that we deal with, and we're directly or indirectly dealing with 238 First Nations, which represents about 1/3 of all First Nations in Canada. And many of our communities have environmental contamination issues. And what's happening with those issues is that it's preventing development. not having clean water in some communities, sewage services, power, energy problems. All of this is critical infrastructure. There is hundreds of millions of dollars of contamination to the sites that our communities can't develop. I know that's a study, outdated now. Study in 2014 estimated $2.6 billion in estimated cost from environmental contamination. Right now, in our communities alone, we have over 800 reserve parcels that are contaminated that have direct effect. These 800 reserve parcels are distracting from the economic development potential that can happen, must happen. We need cleanup, we need remediation, and we can't have peoples from offside coming to try and contaminate further. And we need laws in place, and we need those laws recognized. We have the power to put environmental laws in place. What we need now is enforcement, and that is a real significant issue, because if our communities say, hey, this site is being contaminated, it's costing us dollars and time and so forth, we've got the power to put environmental laws, but we're having problems with governments to say, let's help us enforce them, provincially, federally. So it's a combined issue. It's costing the country and our communities hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's a serious barrier to economic development.